One of the reasons you wanted to become a creator was so that you could be creative. But is it something you're focused on? Lawrence is the writer behind the hugely popular newsletter and blog More to That. One of his most popular blog posts, Travel is No Cure for the Mind, has had over 1 million readers, and his email list has over 26,000 subscribers. But Lawrence isn't one for growth hacks and metrics. He's much more focused on his craft.
I knew that I didn't want to do the growth hack stuff and things of that nature because, like I was saying, I want to have a healthy relationship with my creativity.
And in this conversation, he shares his thoughts on idea generation, storytelling, and overcoming creative blocks and burnout.
Essentially, I write stories that kind of navigate the nuances of the human condition. And I use philosophy, psychology, these topics or these kind of disciplines as my frame. But then I kind of imbue this with the playfulness because a lot of those topics could be very heady and very serious. So I inject kind of my inner child into it through the usage of illustrations and these characters that I drew, I don't know, when I was 10 or something like that, all the way till now. So it turns out that all those doodles kind of had a professional usage, which is nice. But yeah, I kind of like to combine those two realms together to create a combination of either long form stories or shorter form reflections that navigate all kinds of topics, anywhere from money to our thoughts on death to the finiteness of life, meaning, and all these various things that kind of fall under the umbrella of those frames.
Yeah, I love how much of a deep thinker you are. That's one of the reasons that I got drawn to your blog. I'm interested why you chose a blog in the first place, like a blog and newsletter format, for the way that you choose to tell stories.
Yeah, I think, because before I was a musician and I, used that as a vehicle for expression, and I was a beat maker specifically. And I think the great thing about music is that it's kind of like music is a double-edged sword in the sense of it's great because it allows you to channel your emotions and put that into your beats or your instrumentals and stuff like that. But the thing about it is that it's hard to convey ideas through it, especially if the medium doesn't make usage of lyrics and so forth, like it was in my case. So as I started to transition out of music and start looking more into other art forms, I kind of started dabbling in writing and doing that through like a personal Medium page years ago. And I just enjoyed how it allowed me to really play with ideas as opposed to purely like a mood or emotion or something like that. And it's really, I'm sure if many writers will tell you, it's a way to clarify your thinking. And like as you write, you actually think. It's not you think, and then you write. It happens kind of concurrently. And I really enjoyed that dynamic. And given that I also, when I think back on it, I used to write a decent amount when I was a kid. I used to write fiction stories and stuff like that. And one thing I always tell people if they're kind of looking at different art forms and what's one avenue of creative expression for them is, what did you do when you were a kid? Or what are some of the things, the kernels of things that you were doing when you were a kid? Because that was when there were no other responsibilities. There was no notion of, is this practical? Where can this go? Like, what does a career path look like for me? It's just very pure. And you want to find the element of purity that has pervaded your life. And when you're thinking about how you might want to express yourself as a full-grown adult with adult responsibilities and all that stuff, then it's a good place to start, because then you understand that there's something inherently beautiful about it in the context of your life. And then the career stuff and all that, the strategies, you can kind of figure that out as it goes. So when I thought about it in that sense too, I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense that writing is the way that I want to express myself, at least for now. And, that may evolve, that may change. But I knew that writing was going to be something I wanted to experiment with and do it in a deep manner.
I love that. And I love what you said about how, you just do what's kind of pure to you, because even even the topics you talk about are so broad versus so many creators that I see online, they have this super specific niche because that's the advice that we get given. And then all their
Mhm.
topic ideas are like very specific. But I feel like that's also more difficult for you because you could almost talk about anything. So how do you come up with your ideas and know which ideas you're actually going to put out there?
I really just go off of wherever my curiosity pulls me at any time. And like any artist or creator will tell you, their art is an extension of just their day-to-day life, right? And I think that I like to I think the thing about being an artist is that you kind of have to combine discipline and serendipity together. Because if you're pure disciplinarian about whatever, whether it's idea discovery or what have you, then everything just becomes a job, and it's all about, oh, I am here investing my energy and expecting some sort of return, right? And it becomes a very transactional relationship with your creativity. On the flip side, if everything is serendipitous, right, and you're just like very whimsical, and anything that kind of fleets your way, you're like, ooh, and you want to grab it, and you don't ground that in any sort of regimen, then, like the element of practicality, it becomes more of an issue. So, I think in my case, when it comes to just pure idea generation and stuff, it happens where really it's imbued in just serendipity. Like, okay, I've been thinking about something, or I have a conversation with someone about something interesting, and there's a thread that emerges from a book that I'm reading or something of that nature, and all I want to do is I just want to pull on it a little further. And that's kind of how I view it as, is that like we have all these loose threads all around us, no matter what we're doing, and it's up to our sense of agency to desire to pull on it or not. And
Yeah.
that's all I'm really doing. Oh, that thread looks interesting. And we have so many things in our life, right? Like, you are not just a creator. Like in my case, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, I'm all these things. And I think one thing that's really important for me, and what I recommend for people when they're struggling with this question of, how do I find ideas? How do I find compelling ones? Is first understand this diffusion of identity. Like, you're not just a creator, you are all these different things. And understanding that your identity is spread across these different domains, then all of a sudden everything becomes interesting. Because when you're just thinking about, oh, I need something to create, I need something to delve into and pull it out, then you're just stressing yourself out and you're not really looking. But if
Yeah.
you understand that there's something about your day-to-day experience and everything that you do that has something interesting in it, and that there's something beautiful about what you would otherwise people would say is mundane, then all of a sudden everything becomes a thread you want to pull on. And I say a lot that our greatest asset as a creator is to kind of be grateful for the unknown, to be grateful for uncertainty instead of fearing uncertainty, which is kind of our default condition, which is actually
Hmm.
very closely tied into our fear of death. But if you have a healthier relationship with uncertainty, then that's what curiosity is, right? Isn't that what curiosity is? That you're thankful that you don't know everything. And I think
True.
if you're able to cultivate that consistently in the context of your day-to-day life, then there will be a lot of ideas that emerge. And I think that's why my work is so diverse and touches so many topics. And I have no desire whatsoever to create a niche, or to find one thing and just hone in on that because that's how I build an audience or something like that. No, because for me, it's a lifestyle. It's something that I want to do. I want to keep playing this creativity game, and the only way for me to do that is to have a healthy relationship with it.
I love that so much. And I find it interesting because you obviously draw a lot from your own experiences and, your life around you. But when I read your writing, it doesn't ever seem like you're writing, just about yourself. You're writing to someone. So
Mm.
how do you make sure that your writing resonates with other people and it's not just about your own life experiences?
I have this belief that any individual mind is not localized to itself. That whatever you may be experiencing, there is some shared thread that could be had with anyone in the world, really. I think about this a lot, especially as a dad, where I'm just doing something like changing my daughter's diaper, or I'm just doing the dishes or something, and the thought of like there's someone out there that either is in the heights of wealth or in the depths of poverty, and all of us, no matter who we are, we feel this, like this washing of dishes, or like changing your kid's diaper, and like there's something really beautiful about that. And I think the same thing applies to the things that we think, things that we feel. And if I could better understand my mind and my experiences, then I could understand humanity in general. I think that we're all linked in that way. So when I come across an experience or an idea that has come downstream from my life, one thing I love to do kind of almost immediately is to think of like, oh, how can this be extrapolated to everyone? And understanding that the emotions that I'm feeling as a result of that experience has been felt by someone before. And really, what you're trying to do in that sense, and if you want to have this idea resonate with another, is you have to think about it in the context of a story. And like the way I view stories is not through like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey and 3-act structures and these things that kind of act as formulas that we nod our heads to, but don't really. I think if we're really being earnest, like we're like, okay, hero's journey, cool, but I don't, unless I'm really trying to make it work, it's hard to see that contextualized in an everyday idea I have. So I really condense it down to its simplest form, which is, every idea inherent within it consists of some sort of problem that you're thinking through. And the notion of like the things that you highlight when you're taking out a book or things that you watch, you resonate with them because they address a problem. Okay. So, for example, if you look through any of my notebooks, you will never find anything about fashion in it. Okay. Because it will only take you 5 seconds to hang out with me to be like, man, this dude Lawrence, he doesn't care about fashion at all. It'll be very apparent right away. And as a result, I don't have anything that I've cultivated or anything that I've highlighted that has to do with how I could dress better or anything like that. But do I have a lot of things about, what it means to cultivate meaning, and all these kinds of stuff? Yeah, a ton of that stuff, because these are the problems that I care about. So when you understand that every idea inherent in it, what you're interested in, addresses some sort of issue or some sort of problem, then what you're trying to do in your story is you want to first make your reader, your viewer, or whatever care about that problem as deeply as you do, as if it was visceral to them as well. So that's one of the core things about creating a great story, is that you have a problem that you resonate with. And then, people a lot of time think a lot about the resolution of a story, and I call this the takeaway. And I always tell people that the takeaway is not as important as addressing the problem and framing the problem well enough, right? And this is why whenever people read an entire book or watch a movie and they're like, "Oh, they could have condensed that whole thing down to one sentence." It's like, no, you're not understanding the point of a story. The point of a story is not the ending. Otherwise, no one would watch Marvel movies or whatever knowing that the good guys win. It's all about how you feel, and do you resonate with the characters? Do you feel like you're immersed in that world? And you could do the same thing with a blog post or anything of that nature, or with a YouTube video. So get the person caring about the problem, and somewhere in the middle of going from problem to takeaway, have an aha moment where someone views the problem in a unique angle, where they're like, huh, I never thought of the problem in that way before. And that, as a result, when you think about the problem, when you present an issue in a new angle, then the reader or the viewer could come to the conclusion themselves. And that's a great story, actually, is when they have the agency to come across that solution on their own. That's a good story, which is why people love interpretive endings. People don't really like clean cut things. They want to feel like, I came to that myself. I could kind of see where this is going. And sometimes if it doesn't go where they thought it would go, it actually resonates with them more. So I think if you think about these elements of storytelling, and not through kind of these huge principles that have been passed down to us generation or generation, just make it into the simplest form. I think that's what makes a story resonate.
And how do you actually go about doing that? So how do you actually go about making your reader care about the problem? And, like how do you actually go about doing that in your writing?
Yeah, so we could use an example of one of my pieces, and it's one of my more popular ones called "Travel is No Cure for the Mind."
I love that
Um,
post.
oh, nice.
I share that with my friends all the time.
Oh, that's beautiful. Why do you? Okay, I'll ask you first. Why do you share that post with your friends?
I just think it's so, I mean, when I was like figuring life out in my 20s, I feel like the most common thing was, oh, you should travel. You should, that's the common thing to do is traveling in your 20s. And especially for me, like I have so many friends who travel a lot more than I do. Like I can't necessarily afford to travel as much as they do. And I think, oh, I'm missing out on life. And my life is just like not interesting enough because, they've got all these cool experiences. And I'm just kind of like in my routine, I'm quite introverted. So I'm always at home doing my own thing. And I think your blog posts really made me open my eyes to like what is the travel actually doing, and like it's the whole hedonic triangle thing and just all of that. Like it made me see it completely differently, and it really opened my eyes. And I think everyone eventually experiences that, where they're like, oh, I'm trying to chase this thing over and over again, but then it becomes like my new normal, and then it's not exciting anymore.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. And I think that's what you just said right there is a good foundation for me kind of speaking on this piece in specific and how I got it to resonate through the through that framework I just described. So basically, like, what is the fundamental problem of this story, right? And like you just gave a brief primer on it, but essentially the piece is titled "Travel is No Cure for the Mind," so you kind of have an idea of where it's going. And but the problem here is that like travel doesn't make us happy, even though we think it will, and in momentary spurts maybe, but I don't think it's the answer to what we think it is. And so, okay, I have this problem of travel doesn't make us happy now. Okay, do I just say that? And, like travel doesn't make us happy, right? And as a result, this is what we should feel. No, that's not a story. So now that I have that problem, I think of, okay, what are some different ways I could present that? And um, I thought a lot about, okay, what if knowing that, like you just said, this is something that we all will probably feel after some time. Like, we all know if we have gone to some country or somewhere for like a couple of weeks, there's always this huge novelty spike. And then there's like this kind of tail that emerges down to normalcy. And then you kind of keep doing that up and down, up and down. But how do I want to present that? Do I want to use the word hedonic treadmill? Not really. It's kind of played out. So, how else can I do this? So then I was just thinking, like, what if I put the reader at the center of this story and then I say you the whole time? Imagine that you are doing this, you are doing that, understanding that this is a phenomenon that many people will have experienced. So if you read that piece, you'll notice that from the beginning, I say you. Imagine that you're here in this kind of mundane office environment or whatever, and kind of guiding them through that journey to have a realization themselves. So I'm really from the first half of the piece, maybe even 60%, I'm just building up the problem. I'm not getting to the takeaway at all. It's just about, hey, I want you to feel what it's like to want to go, you think life is mundane, so you want to burst out of it by traveling, but you're like, you travel for a week on PTO or paid time off, and you come back to work and you're like, damn, this is not it. I'm going to just leave everything and leave for months. And you do that, but then what do you feel? Yeah, it just feels like everyday life again. But I want you to feel it. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm also presenting like analogies, like, hey, imagine that your life is this box of daily experience and you cycle through it over and over again. I'm presenting these visuals and these analogies because they also, analogies, metaphors, they stick very well. And I could do this all without mentioning things like the hedonic treadmill. People could understand that without me having to reference that. And the aha moment that I described, and kind of, and you feel it, and then you realize the aha moment is, oh, damn. Travel doesn't make us happy because our mind travels with us wherever we go. So if we have a restless mind and wherever we are at, doesn't matter whether you're in Ibiza, it doesn't matter whether you're in Seoul, whatever, it travels with you. And if that was restless, eventually it catches up. So so you see, that's the aha moment. That's kind of the surprising element. But if I just say that, it sounds like a cliche. I have to build to that. You have to feel it yourself. And now that you understand that, it's like, oh, okay, now that I viscerally understand that reality that our mind travels with us wherever we go. Now the takeaway is kind of like, okay, wait, the answers are not in these faraway places. They're actually at home. And I have to understand what it's like to address a lot of these things at home and be grateful for what I have at home, because that's the only way you could be grateful for everything else outside of home. So so you see how there's like this kind of this train of thought here guiding you from the station of the problem to the station of the takeaway. And through that journey, I'm elucidating why travel is no cure for the mind. So that's an example of how I've kind of thought about this story and how I want to present it.
I find it really interesting because you've completely challenged everything I know about storytelling, especially online, where I feel like most people tell you to have a hook and share that problem straight away and solve whatever it is that the person's come to you for straight away. So I really like how you've changed things. I'm really interested to know
Mm.
what your process looks like. So your writing routine, because there's a lot that goes into every blog post, like not even just the writing, the illustrations. How long does everything take you, and how do you spread it out throughout the week?
Yeah, so in the beginning, actually all of my pieces were like travel is no cure for the mind. So the like just to give you an idea of that one, it took probably somewhere like 100 hours to do, from thinking about it to drawing to writing it. So and this might be a kind of lesson really for other creators, is that like when I released that piece, I was like, oh, okay, now I got to do everything like that. And so like I only published 8 or 9 pieces my entire first year of working on this. Granted, I was working a full-time job then, but I believed this thought that, oh, okay, I have to keep doing it like this, so every piece is going to take 80 to 100 hours or something like that. But I also knew that, at least in that first year, we're doing it this way. It did help to kind of differentiate some of my work, because I knew that not a lot of people are spending that much time in a single blog post, especially if you don't know that if it'll be received well or what have you. But it was also my way of testing whether I wanted to do this format really, and I found a lot of enjoyment in it. But I think the lesson here also is that I realized that this is not what I want to keep doing, and that it's okay to, not be so holden to one type of thing. And especially because travel is no cure for the mind, it did very well. A lot of people resonated with it. And like the temptation would be, well, I just do more of that. But the reality is like you can do whatever you want. And I think after my first year, I realized that more. So I started doing shorter things along with longer things. And then now it's pretty much to the point where I have a few long pieces that I put out a year that take me a while, not quite 100 hours, but maybe like 40, 50 or something like that. Maybe even more. And then I also do a lot of shorter form pieces too, where I just sit at my desk, I set a timer for 2 hours, I write, and boom, it's done, and I let it out. Um, so I actually have a delineation where my longer pieces and my more thought out ones, where I'm thinking through the story and stuff like that, I just call them stories. And the ones that I kind of bang out in 2 or 3 hours, I call reflections, because those are more of my ways of figuring out what I think. And like I was saying earlier, writing is a way of figuring out what you think. But when you're storytelling, you're thinking a lot about presentation. And as a result, you kind of have an idea of what you want to say. A story is more about, am I like presenting this well enough so a person understands it and they feel it. So they're two actually different modes. And what's great is that my reflections help to inform my stories, because the setting a timer for 2 hours and just writing, that allows me to figure out what I think. And in turn, figuring out what I think allows me to think later about, oh, how do I want to present the fact that I thought that? So it's this nice kind of loop. And as a result, now I have a mixture of those. So I guess the parallel here for any creator could be, if you have a thread that you want to pull on a little, right? Then feel free to use something where the stakes are a lot less for you, where it doesn't feel like you're presenting this. And instead it's like, oh, okay, I just want to pull on it, but I want to use my art to pull on it. So I'm using my writing to pull on it and trying to untangle it a little bit. And then once you feel like you have it to a good place, and you've also taken maybe some other threads that you've pulled out, and you're like, oh, damn, these kind of tie in and they link in, then you have some source material here that you can work with. And you're like, all right, now it's about how do I present this? And then you can do that in the form of your art form as well, but then you could devote more time and attention to doing that. So kind of, don't be so holden to one thing, and it's okay to mess around with different things. It's okay to just take an hour or less on what you're working on, publish it. And it's also okay if you want to spend much more longer than that, do that too. But for me, I found that mixing it up has been a really nice way of approaching this.
Yeah, I like that because it also makes it more sustainable as well. I
Yeah.
find it really interesting because you tweeted earlier this year that you're not one for growth tactics and hacks. And just speaking to you, I can definitely feel that already. But I'm really interested because, like you said, travel is no cure for the mind did really well. So where have the people come from? Like, how are people finding you and your work?
Yeah, it's wild because it's pretty much all organic word of mouth. Because I also don't do SEO. So if I don't do much social media, as of now at least, and I also don't do much SEO, then the only way people find out about my work really is someone's like, oh damn, this is good. Let me share it with this other person, whether it's through, I don't know, text or through someone's newsletter or what have you. And as a result, yeah, most of my audience comes to me that way. Now, so things have actually shifted a little bit in the last couple months because the email provider that I use actually started doing this network where creators that could recommend one another. So creators that I've been friends with for a while, it's just, some of whom have been on this podcast are just like, oh yeah, I like Lawrence's work, and I like his work or her work, and then we just kind of recommend one another, and audience growth could happen that way. But up until then, it was mostly just, oh yeah, people enjoying my work and wanting to share it. Now, it's also, I think, important that if you're let me take a little step back here in the sense of, I knew that I didn't want to do the growth hack stuff and things of that nature because, like I was saying, I want to have a healthy relationship with my creativity. And for some folks, the growth tactics and all that stuff actually makes them feel like they are artists and they're creators. Like, oh, I'm, like it's an art in itself to figure out how to grow and how to use threads or whatever and stuff like that. Now, I just know that for me, I don't want to take someone's template and then apply it to my work. That's just not how I feel like I'm going to love what I do. So if I know that I'm not the type of person that's going to go online and see like what is this person doing, and like how can I copy that and put in my context, if I know I'm not going to do that, then the way in which that I want my work to reach people has to kind of be through the quality of the work in itself. And am I touching people through the resonance of the piece? And it's a little bit of a different game, but I think it's one, at least for me, that I love playing because it makes me think about not just my life, but other people's lives and other people's experiences through a much more fine-tuned lens. Because I'm trying to understand the human condition. I'm not trying to understand how I get my blog to grow to X amount of people or get my newsletter at this level or anything like that. And really, if I could do that piece well enough, and what's great also is that if I do that well enough, other not just like not just other readers, but like also other people who create find my work as well. And I think that's one of the interesting paradoxes about the creative landscape is that, anyone can create, especially now, and publish material and stuff like that. But what's interesting is that people also have an immediate understanding for good quality work. Like people could see something right away and then be like, oh, okay, like this one took time. As opposed to this was like, oh, okay, this was probably done in like a few minutes, just trying to trying to grow or something like that. Right. And I think that's what I want my work to feel like. But it's not just pure hours and energy I spend, but also just like, oh, like this guy took time to think through this. And like, do they get the sense that I've thought through it a bit and put it out? And like, I think if I can do that well enough, then it's not just other readers, it's also other creators, and then creators find out about my stuff, share it. Like I don't know how you found out about my stuff, but it must have been through one of those channels. And yeah, I think it's important to ask yourself, like, what game do you want to play here? And if you even had all the growth that you wanted, right? Like, what are you going to do with it? Is the thing. I think because growth, you want growth for something. There's no way that growth is an end in itself. It's always you grow to parlay that into something else. I don't want to parlay my creativity for something else. It is what it is. Like it's the end in itself. And I think that the longer I could view it that way, the more I want to keep playing, the more I want to continue to do it. But if I always feel that, oh, I'm trading in today for this imagined tomorrow based upon how I'm growing my work or what I'm doing here, then I'm just perpetually waiting for something to arrive.
True. True.
Instead, it's like what I'm doing right now, I've arrived. I'm here and I'm working on something that it's I love it, but it's mad challenging. It's super challenging, but it's the challenge that feels worthwhile. And I think that's important too, is that creativity, we think of it as like this word like, oh, it's the best, but it's nuanced, right? There are many creative endeavors that are just not right for you. And it's like, and you have to understand that, but sometimes you have to go through it because you're like, the challenge that this texture of creativity is providing, it's not making me a better human being. It's not making me a better person. And that's kind of what I felt when I was in the music industry. Is that after a while, it's like I love making music, but the business of this and to get it out and like the way I was approaching it, it was not making me a better person, I felt. Whereas with writing, when I decided to delve into this, like I really delved into a lot of intention because I had that experience with music where I knew what I didn't want to do. And now I could like import some of those lessons in what I do here. And it made me really think about like, can I fall in love with the challenge that this art form presents? Um, and if the answer to that is yes, then I know I could continue doing it. And that's one of the reasons why I spent so long on my first couple of blog posts for more of that, because I didn't know if anyone was going to look at it. I didn't know if anyone's going to read it. I had, zero. My audience number was zero. Well, but I first sent out that post to 21 friends, right? But like effectively, I didn't know if anyone was going to read this or share it. But it was my way of testing my love for this. Like, can I spend this much time doing this? And if the answer says yes, then maybe I could do this for a while. So I think these are some of the questions to ask yourself as a creator or someone even starting out is like, hey, figure out the intrinsic motivation piece first rather than the external validation piece. Figure that out. And then the external stuff, like, I think that when you love something and when you put so much care into it, at a certain point, the external parts, some of those things start to kind of show up. Um, and as a result, at that point, then okay, yeah, you could be smart about like, oh yeah, okay, let me kind of pick the low hanging fruit here, or like if I have a piece that I really put a lot of energy into, let me like send it out, and I do that too. Like if I work on a piece that I really enjoyed and I feel like it's really good, then I'll send it out to some of my creator friends, right, in advance, and be like, hey, this is something that I worked on. I think you might like it, and kind of leave it at that. And then, if they enjoy it, then they'll share it or whatever. I have no expectations for them to. I just want to share it. And I think that what that does is like it helps me feel like my work is integrated with them, and at the same time, like I know that if they resonated with it, then they'll help to get it out there as well. But like I don't expect that, and I don't. At this point, it's more of just I just want to work on what I want to work on, and if people enjoy it, they'll share it. If they won't, if they don't, they don't. It's all good. So I kind of have like this approach to it, which is why when people ask me about audience building and how they do it, I'm like, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, because I don't know how practical this is, except to what I offer is, can you delve a little deeper into your motivations and why you're doing this, and maybe take a pause to understand that before you go look for the next formula to follow to grow your audience.
Wow, I love that. And I love how you're so focused on the craft and how you really nurture your relationship with creativity. It makes me wonder, do you ever struggle with creative blocks or burnout? And if so, like, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, burnout. Oh, hot topic. um, I think. Well, the thing with burnout is, it's funny. I actually just wrote on this, but
Ah,
I
yes, I
think
remember that
burnout is.
piece.
What was that?
The self-judgment piece.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And that was an example of reflection where I just sat for 2 hours, I wrote it out, and then let it fly. But people seem to have enjoyed that one as well. So I think with burnout, you know, it's not like this response to so much on your plate. I think that's the generalization of burnout and why we think it emerges, but I think it's almost always has to do with yourself and how you exploit yourself. And there's a lot of interesting philosophy around that I won't delve into now, but a lot of it is kind of about this person within you that is motivated by the desire for freedom. And then in order to achieve that freedom, you think I have to keep providing value. I have to keep providing value. That's how I earn my freedom. But in reality, all that does is it makes you really hard on yourself. You actually don't need a boss telling you what you do and don't do and do more. You'll do that to yourself just fine. That's
Yeah.
what burnout is. And I think when I struggle with burnout, it's always that. It's always that. And it's always a reminder of like, yo, you are very mean to yourself right now. you're, you're being a total asshole to yourself. And you're not understanding that there's also something inherently about you outside of this identity as a creator that is worth celebrating. And can you take a quick moment to do that, as
Mm.
hard as it may be? Can you try to do that? So whenever I feel the slimy hands of burnout start to creep within my mind, what I try to do is I just, for like a day or something, I just kind of pause. Not because I don't want to work. That's not really what it is. It's more so because I want to remind myself that there's something about this day that where I'm not dedicating it to creating, but I'll walk away from it thinking like, oh, that was a great day.
Mm.
And why was it great? Well, it's because there were all these other things that I did. And like, this chat I had with a friend, or this book I read, or the time my daughter smiled at me, or I did this with my wife. Like, oh yeah, there's these things are worth celebrating. And paradoxically enough, like this links to your first question about, do I face creative blocks? I think creative blocks exist only when you feel like you're trying to force something, when you feel like you don't your gas is on empty, your tank is on empty, but you're just trying to push out that extra mile. And the question always becomes like, what are you in a rush for?
Mm.
What are you in a rush for here? And this is another thing too, is like, we think we have to follow cadences, and that's fine. A lot of my friends do that. They have like a weekly newsletter or stuff like that. But just because someone else does it doesn't mean you have to do it. Okay, like like I don't follow a cadence for myself because I've set this intentionally because I knew that if I set a cadence to my work, then I'm placing deadlines on my curiosity. It's like I have to ship something before I've thought through it. And if I do that, then basically I'm always in a rush. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm rushing. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
rushing. And, rushing and the feeling of rushing is driven by your inner critic. Like, get that out, get that out, get that out, get that out. And like you have that cycle enough, and next thing you know, you have burnout. So it's not the impending deadline that does it. It's more about your inability to be kind to yourself. And a lot of these things come from how you structured your weeks, how you structure what you have promised, quote unquote, to people, right? So um, never just take what someone has done and think that that's the way you have to approach it. Like it always comes downstream from who you are and what's important to you and what your values are. And does feeling rushed actually help you as a creator, right? Some people thrive under that. They have deadlines like, yeah, I just need to get it out, and that's what invigorates them. But
Mm.
if you feel like that actually detracts and that will make you feel like a shell of yourself each week to fulfill that, then please don't do it. Don't do it,
Yeah.
because what you get in that week of putting something out, you lose in the long game. You'll quit a lot faster if that's what you do. So I think if you know you want to do this for a long time, then think about how do you structure your days in the short term and what you promise in order to encourage that longer time frame, and go with that accordingly. So yeah.
I love that. I love how you reframe so many things that we've been told as creators, and you've given us I feel like a healthier approach of looking at things. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to jump to a quick fire round now. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions that I ask every creator that comes on air, starting with
Mm.
what's your favorite thing about being a creator?
Oh, my favorite thing is just the fact that I can confidently assert that I'm an artist.
Mm.
Uh, I think well, you know what I realized? A lot of people have trouble with that, saying that I'm an artist,
Yeah.
I'm a creator, and I think a lot of it just has to do with yeah, you feel like you have to fulfill some sort of list in order to say that you are. Like I have to publish X things or do this or that, but I think just being a creator and understanding that hey, I'm an artist and embodying that identity makes me view the world as if I am an artist, and it just the world becomes a much more interesting place as a result.
I love that. And what's something that gives you the most inspiration for your work?
Hmm. The mundane gives me a lot of inspiration.
Oh, I like that. Nice.
Yeah. And the fact that yeah, like I'm inspired just sitting on my couch sometimes, just looking at something or thinking about something. And the fact that there is so much beauty in what we would see as ordinary,
Mm.
and my I think I have a more heightened ability to do that, just because I guess I write, and I think writers all have that. You kind of find the beauty in the mundane,
Yeah.
and yeah, it constantly inspires me.
Nice. And what's one tool that helps you create?
Oh, okay. The greatest tool for me is this thing you could find for free. It's called Cold Turkey Writer. I recommend this to everybody. Basically, it just turns your computer into a typewriter for X amount of
Oh,
hours
nice.
or a word count. Yeah, whatever you have, and you really can't do anything but write when you're in it, and it limits context switching. And what you'll find real quick as a result of that is sometimes as you write, you're like, oh, yeah, we have this compulsion to want to like look something up and
Yeah.
do some research or something like that. But sometimes a lot of that is because you don't have confidence in what you're writing and you want to look for someone else to validate that thought. But what Cold Turkey Writer helps you do is it helps you just stay in there. So you kind of either have to just write your way through it or maybe put a blank in there saying, I'll look at this later. But it keeps you focused on what you think, not what
Yeah.
another person thinks. So I like the constraints that it puts on that, and I think it really
Wow.
helps with writing.
That's awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out. What's something that helps with your creator work-life balance?
Create a work-life balance. Hmm. Um. Well, I think the most obvious one is that I'm a father, so like no matter what I'm doing, if yeah, if my daughter runs into my room and like she's actually pretty good with like somehow she knows that when I'm in this room and door is closed, like, oh, he's like doing stuff there. Like there's like a force field around it where she like repels off
Oh,
of. But sometimes she breaks through that force field and just like comes in and like wants to hang out. And it's just like a very immediate reminder that like, oh yeah, there's this beautiful little being here that
oh,
that reminds me that whatever I'm typing on the page could be on hold. So that always helps, and not just helps, but it confirms that that is reality, and
yeah.
to view it as such.
Yeah, what a great reminder. And what's one piece of advice that you would give to other creators?
I feel like I've been like just blurting out a bunch of different
Yeah.
things for creators here. But yeah, if I were to really boil it down, I think the first is like you want to do this for a while, right? Like this is something that it inspires you, but also like just kind of be open to the fact that like whatever you're doing now may not be it. Like I think we it's like, oh, I'm writing right now, but like, and I might be so attached to my identity as a writer, but who knows, like maybe I won't be. Maybe my mode of expression will take a different form, and I don't know where that will go. Like I don't know if for you, even a couple years ago, you're like, I'm going to be podcasting, right? It's like you probably don't know. You just don't know. It just
Yeah.
happens. But like the more open you are to these different avenues, the less you are so fixated on one thing. So I think the meta level, you want to be creating for a long time, ideally for your whole life. But at the micro level, be open to the fact that your mode of expressing that big word creativity can change, and that gives you a healthier relationship with it as well.
I think that's a great way to end the podcast. I think this has been such an interesting podcast conversation. I feel like you've really spun creativity in such a beautiful way. So thank you so much for coming on air and giving our listeners something to think about.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to be here with you. It's really exciting. So thank you for having me on.
If you're a creator and you do sponsorships, check out Passionfroot. We streamline your entire workflow for you. I'll see you in the next one.